Welcome to our Espresso Live on Legacy Giving. We are thrilled to have you with us as we delve into the transformative power of planned giving. Legacy giving goes beyond the act of donating. It's about making a lasting impact and leaving a personal legacy that supports the causes you hold dear. Today, we will cover the essentials of legacy giving, including various strategies and significant benefits it offers to both the donors and the recipients. Our experts will share valuable insights on how one can incorporate legacy giving into one's philanthropic efforts. So thank you for joining us. We look forward to a productive and interactive session as we explore how your legacy can create lasting and positive change in Niagara, a community we call home. My name is Mishka Balsam, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. And my thanks go to the Niagara Community Foundation, also known as NCF, the power behind this important webinar. But let me start out by actually introducing our panelists and experts. We have with us today Bryce Murray, partner at Murray & Associates, LLP. While Bryce cut his legal teeth practicing mergers and acquisitions on Bay Street at Osler LLP, one of Canada's most prominent law firms, he was born and raised in Niagara and always wanted to return home to raise his family. I think it's a familiar story to many of us. Bryce diversified his practice to include real estate, wills and estates, and more general corporate and commercial law, including commercial and private lending, and has been practicing in Niagara since 2015. Bryce is an allied professional partner with Niagara Community Foundation, helping connect clients with NCF to meet their philanthropic wishes. Our next panelist is Bryan Rose, familiar face and executive director of the Niagara Community Foundation. Bryan is passionate about philanthropy and has offered and fostered a deep and broad spectrum of experience during his 20-plus-year career in the charitable sector. A lifelong resident of Niagara, Bryan has deep roots in the community with a strong network of professional contacts and personal connections across the region and beyond. He is a skilled team leader who believes in building enduring and genuine relationships rooted in personal integrity and a shared spirit for philanthropy. Bryan began his tenure as NCF's executive director just about 8 years ago in 2016. And our third expert is Madeline Woodhead, Wealth Advisor, Woodhead Wealth Management Group, National Bank Financial Wealth Management. Madeline has over 35 years' experience in the financial services industry. Additionally, Madeline is a designated personal financial planner and works closely with clients to identify the strategies and opportunities that best meet their unique financial objectives. She is a fund holder with Niagara Community Foundation, the past NCF board president, and current ambassador and volunteer. Bryce, Bryan, Madeline, thank you so very much for giving us your time this morning and especially your expertise. I'm really looking forward to today's dialogue. And to all of our attendees, today's format is really meant to be a very interactive one. Many of you have provided us with questions already in advance of today's webinar, and we're committed to getting to all of them. I would also like to encourage you to utilize the chat functions for questions. Please know if you direct them directly to me, the questions will be anonymous and only I can see them as well as the panelists. For all participants, today's session will be recorded and will be made available to you following this webinar. And lastly, if you would like to enable live transcript, you can find that option on your Zoom screen. If you run into any technical difficulties or have any questions, please utilize the chat function, and we're eager to help you out. When I looked and reviewed the questions that have come forward so far, and actually also discussed it with us as a team, we kind of found that they fit into three particular pillars. The topic today is really looking at what are the trends in legacy planning and giving. There were a couple of questions around that one and that topic, followed by what options people have when it comes to legacy giving, and lastly, how to make the best decisions. So I've tried to group the questions into those 3 pillars, but please know we're open to any additional questions that come forward that fall outside of those pillars. But just to start out, I am going to lean a little bit on you, Bryan, and actually maybe give us a little bit of an overview about legacy giving. What are some of the scenarios that lead your clients and your partners in the community towards thinking about legacy giving?
Thank you, Mishka, and thanks for this opportunity. So yeah, legacy giving. You know, what we know right now and what the trends are is, you know, we're about to experience another major, you know, intergenerational transfer of wealth here in Canada. There's about $1 trillion that is going to move from the baby boomers to the Generation Xers in the next number of years. And so families, businesses, everyone really needs to think about how that wealth can be shared. You know, they call it giving while living. You know, so whether you're thinking about, you know, contributing to your family or being philanthropic and thinking about your favorite charities, all of that conversation, you really needs to start sooner rather than later. And then the trends in Canada really lend to that. And you know, we're very focused on that with the Niagara Community Foundation, about people thinking about what their estate plan might be and how they can leave a legacy in the community.
Thank you so very much. I think it does actually, it's a wonderful way actually to start out our conversation that we're going to have, and just seeing what aspects are actually shaping the landscape, as you have pointed out. And I think it's always really good to have a sound understanding of that aspect of it. But when we listen to our economy, when we listen to the way people are feeling right now, I was wondering, and if there are any other changes in the way that people are maybe leaving gifts based on the current economy. And I was wondering if maybe we can bring in Bryce or Madeline into this discussion too, and just saying, like, what are some of the other drivers other than the intergenerational wealth and the shift in the generational shift that we're looking at, the demographic shift that we have? What are other economic drivers maybe that people are looking and turning to saying, this is the right time for us to consider it? And I was wondering, Bryce, if you maybe wanted to jump in, and then maybe we'll pass it on to Madeline after that.
Of course, thank you. It's an interesting time, and I think I have to admit that my experience is anecdotal, right? What I see is what comes into my office. In recent years, I have seen a decline in charitable giving. I think that was very largely tied to COVID, tied to anxiety about mortgages, interest rates, everything else. Obviously, I think we might be coming up to a point where that mortgage problem might even compound a little bit. So I think in the short term, I don't see a lot of change until there is that transfer of wealth that Bryan was talking about, or until we get a little bit more security, or at least knowing that money's going to be there. I think the charitable giving that I'm seeing in our wills and our offices are primarily people without family. So I think everybody right now is sort of keeping everything a little close to the family, close to home, and I do think that will change once there's a little bit more comfort in the economy for everyone else.
I think, Bryce, you're making an excellent point. We have also had on a number of occasions the CEO of Imagine Canada, an organization that actually supports nonprofits and charities across Canada, and they have indicated, and their reports indicate the same. It's not a Niagara issue, it's not an Ontario one, but it's a trend that we see Canada-wide. And likely even beyond our own borders at this point, is to saying there's hesitancy because of the affordability and the challenges that younger generations especially are running into. So really appreciate you making that point. Madeline, I'm not sure if you want to add something to it from your perspective.
Well, mine is a little different. I found through COVID, clients asked a bit more about charitable giving because they saw what charities were doing in the community. And also, as some other changes have transpired in society and government support, people are becoming more and more aware of what charitable organizations do to enhance life and provide service.
Mhm.
So I would say what I'm seeing is a curiosity in what would this look like? How would I do it? And how much could I do it for? So, a little different than maybe Bryce's experience. Definitely, I would be similar to Bryce that the clients that are typically most interested in philanthropy um, don't have extended family or have had something very impactful happen in the family where they want to um, endow or gift to the organization that helped them through that time.
I really appreciate your perspective, Madeline. I was wondering if you could ask you a follow-up question, because we're often being asked this and we have seen this, is that giving is directly related to something that's maybe affecting their own family. There's a link between a cause and alignment that we choose. Do you see more of that aspect? Because when I look at some of the challenges we're facing around mental health, for example, addictions, when it comes to a housing shortage that we have, shelter issues that we have, do we find that people are more specific about saying, I want to impact this particular area with the giving that I want to put forward, or the legacy that I want to create? And so I was wondering if I can turn it
Yeah,
back to you.
I actually had an experience with a client whose young grandson or grandchildren, I should say, because they were twins, ended up spending a lot of time in the NICU unit in Hamilton. The family was able to stay at Ronald McDonald House. All of a sudden, with them, it became very real, like what that organization did to support families that were in similar situations. Um, you mentioned mental health. Yeah, I've had conversations with individuals whose family members have had to touch a pass stone, and now they're very aware of that work, the work that that organization does in the community, and they want to, participate either by giving one time or looking at a planned out gift.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
would certainly be my experience too. Just in speaking with the fund holders that I do day in and day out. Philanthropy should be very personal, and it's and working with us, you can actually, so if you have passions in specific areas, the NCF is here to work with you on that. But certainly people that have felt the impact or they're concerned about something specific, like the environment. One of our largest gifts came in over $5 million to go to environmental charities because someone was very passionate about the environment. And so giving can be and should be very personal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. And I hear the same, and I see the same, and I feel the same about it too. When I talk to people, this is where we feel like we can make a difference because it's something that is important to us. But Bryan, if I could ask you something else that one of our attendees has brought forward. We have seen such significant changes over the last couple of years in our country, worldwide. We have seen it. Is there, and especially when it comes also to charitable giving and legacy planning, is there legislation on the horizon that might change things, that might improve it? Are there asks out that are actually more in support of nonprofits and charities to encourage more people to move this forward? Is there anything that might entice people to say, I'm going to think about it because it has these potential secondary benefits other than supporting the cause to me and my family as well?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly in Canada, for the most part, our government really actually wants people to think about giving. They want people to leave bequests in their wills. The reality is there will be a portion of people's estates that will, not get passed down to their heirs, right? To their kids or grandkids. There will be a portion. There will be some tax. So can you mitigate that somehow by leaving it to your favorite charitable organization, right? Creating endowment fund or just leaving it outright to your. So currently, the government is very supportive of that. There have been some changes with capital gains exemptions and things of that nature. So, you know, that will have an impact on what some people can do and get back. We're really just waiting to see how all of that trickles down. But for the most part, donating stocks and securities, has a big benefit in capital gains. But ultimately, there will be tax, whether it's probate or estate taxes. So if you can mitigate that through charitable bequests in your estate plan, that really helps you all the way through.
Bryan, I'm actually going to follow. Had a question for Bryce, but I'm going to follow up on this one. Bryan, you have brought forward a lot of things that people probably want to dive more into it. And I was wondering, is like, just to be almost like practical in my questions, how do people go about it to seeing where they maybe who they need to turn to? Can they turn to NCF for that advice, or does it need to be a personal wealth advisor, financial advisor?
That's a great question. So I am not a tax accountant, nor am I a lawyer, nor am I, a wealth manager. Organizations like the Niagara Community Foundation, I can certainly give you some broad advice, and obviously would always encourage you to think about making these plans in your estate for charities. I would really recommend anybody that's very serious about this is to have a conversation with one of your allied or multiple allied professionals. So if you do have an accountant, that would be a great person to start with. That accountant will give you the really good advice, and will actually get into the fine details of what your specific financial picture looks like. From there, you can have a conversation with if you have someone that is managing your portfolio. And then ultimately, you would work with your lawyer to include something like that in your estate plan, to make it part of your will. So we always recommend that you work with your allied professionals on that, because they will give you the specific information that you need. Generally speaking, there are benefits to it. There's no doubt about that. But the minutia, the fine details, you really need to work with a professional on that.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And Bryce?
I was just going to follow up and just say I completely agree with Bryan on that ordering. We have a lot of time people will come in, they'll book an appointment, say that they want to talk about estate planning, and then they want very complicated tax advice that I am not in a position to give. It really is that's the order to go. Talk to your accountant, make sure that it makes sense from a tax perspective, and then we will work with your accountant to affect the change that they're proposing. And like Bryan said, there are a lot of incredible ways that you can minimize your capital gains, maximize the tax benefits to your estate, or even while you're alive if you're doing it inter vivos.
Excellent. And I
So,
see
Mishka, if I can just jump in here too. Both really great comments by Bryce and Bryan. We're a planning centric business. So we work with the two trusted advisors, the accountant, the lawyer. We create a financial plan for the client when they're thinking about this, so they have an illustration in their hand of what it looks like. And, this is, I think, individuals that are interested in doing this should really turn to their wealth advisor and ask for a plan, like, what does it look like when I do this? So that, the planner can talk to the accountant and look where there's some maybe economies or strategies that can be utilized to mitigate tax either now or at the end when it's in the state. So, no one should show up in any one of those three offices just like dumping it there going, let's do this right now. It should be orchestrated between the professionals. So the client's ensured that it's been done the most effectively, efficiently, and will reflect what they want as their end time wish.
I really appreciate it. I'm going to lean on Madeline, you and Bryce for this next question a little bit, because we're still on the topic of what trends we're seeing. And one of the questions is that often when we deal with our clients, they make assumptions, and maybe the assumptions are outdated, or maybe might not reflect the current climate. And so the question that has come forward how has it changed over the past couple of years? And what are some of the assumptions people might have that are outdated now as they're coming to lean on you for legal advice, Bryce, or Madeline, to you for financial advice? And I was wondering, Bryce, if I can start out maybe with you, just saying here's still some assumptions people make. And if we slightly shifted, we likely move and advance the direction that they want to go a bit quicker, more effectively.
Yeah, sure. Again, mine are anecdotal, so I find them, some of them are amusing and they come up a lot. One of my favorites is that people think that they need to do a will because if they don't have one, everything goes to the government. And obviously that is the vast, it's almost impossible for it to happen. The Succession Law Reform Act sets out what happens when someone dies intestate, which is without a will. Essentially, it goes to your family. It just may not be, the order that you want. They say friends are the family you choose. I think the opposite of that is family are the friends that you get stuck with, and some people don't want their family to get it. So I actually get a lot of work from people who realize that their families are going to get it, and that's why they need a will so that they don't. And then, of course, we direct them to charitable giving, which works out very well. So yeah, that is one of them that's always been interesting. The death tax issue is interesting as well. We don't have a death tax in Canada. We have capital gains. We obviously have income taxes that could be incurred at the time of death, but dying itself does not incur any tax. Now, there is an estate administration tax for obviously if your will needs to get processed through the court, but for the vast majority of time, if there are two spouses and one person passes away, we can usually avoid everything by joint ownership. So, and even for passing to the next generation, we can avoid that as well. So it's sort of a misconception about the taxes that are payable, the exact same taxes that are payable while you're alive. I think one of the biggest ones, and I think this is probably the most important one, is that people think estate planning is only if you're wealthy. And it's just a misconception that shoots yourself in the foot. Everybody needs a will. It simplifies the life of everybody that's left behind. Your wishes are respected. It doesn't have to be something that's monetary. It can be an emotional thing. There's family heirlooms that may not be valuable, but what happens to them and who administers it? So, and that's fine. Go do an online will if it's a very basic circumstance. If it's more complicated, then obviously you should use a lawyer, but everybody should consider an estate plan. My understanding right now is I think 70% of Canadians don't have an estate plan, which is problematic. It's not going to help anybody. And of course, it compromises the community you live in, where you could redirect funds to people that actually need it, as opposed to having family fight it out in a courtroom.
You made some excellent points. Before I'm passing it over to you, Madeline, the question, Bryce, I have one follow-up question, and that has also been shared with us. You're talking about the need of having an estate plan to have a will. And then I'm looking at the younger generation coming in, and they're probably saying, oh, that can wait. I might need an estate plan at a certain age, but not now. Can you speak to that topic of at what point should even younger generations consider having an estate plan?
Of course, it'll sound a little self-serving, but obviously I would say the sooner the better. But it is sincere, and I think it should be something that people do when a child turns 18. Is go, and again, I don't care if it's an online will kit or online powers of attorney. Get them done when your child's 18. And the power of attorney is a perfect example. I realize we're veering slightly away from wills, but power of attorney for property, there's no way that a parent can manage the property of a child once that child is 18. So, 18-year-old gets in a car accident, parents have to petition the court to actually have authority. So you could have a power of attorney that's sitting there if it's needed. And maybe it sits there for 20 years and then finally, somebody gets married or has kids and you start updating these things. But do it as young as possible because bad things happen, and pretending that they don't, I think is the reason why people ignore it. They don't want to look at it. They want to put their heads in the sand. The reality is bad things could happen to you. Be prepared. And this way, your wishes could actually be respected, even if the assets aren't massive. At least it will simplify the administration, make it easier on your family.
Thank you so very much. So much appreciated the clarification on it. Madeline, I did want to bring you into the topic because the original question was around the assumptions some people make that might be outdated. So we looked at that aspect from a legal perspective, from a financial perspective, with the things that have changed over the past few years. Are people still making assumptions that you hear when you talk to clients and saying, this is really not the reality anymore?
I would say the biggest assumption that I hear from clients, and it's not so much based on what's happened in the landscape. It's one that permeates, I think, around charitable giving, is they don't have enough money to do it, or it's something only the wealthy do. And I will just share a personal story. I myself fell into that trap. I grew up in Stratford. My family is all there. Like, I'm the oldest of 9. So when the last of my parents died in 2007, my brother suggested we start a fund with the Stratford Community Foundation. And I looked at him and I said, "Are you kidding me? Like, we're not a family of money." And he looked at me like I just punched him. And all of a sudden, I heard myself making an assumption that I had heard clients make about impact. And so I, I turned myself around really quickly, but that's the thing I hear the most from clients or individuals I speak to. They don't understand the opportunity to create impact over time. So maybe you can't give $50,000 today or when you die, but you could give $25 a month, $50 a month. You could start building on the thing that means the most to you. So I think that is one of the biggest assumptions I hear from individuals, is more about, their place in society and what it lets them do, instead of, looking at the opportunity of, it's just like saving money. You save a little bit of money over time, all of a sudden one day you have, hopefully, a larger amount of money. If you give to your favorite charity a little bit over time, you are always supporting them. And you don't know what will happen that lets you do a more transformative or impactful gift.
I think you make an excellent point, and thank you very much also for sharing your personal story and what has actually brought you to that awareness too. It is so true. Bryan is jumping.
Can I just quickly spin off something that Bryce and Maddie have shared? I think even people that I speak to, they're shocked at, the fact that for $5,000 you can create an endowment legacy fund with the Niagara Community Foundation. And so I always joke, you don't have to be a Zuckerberg or a Bezos, or a Weston to do this, right? Like you can be very modest and start where your heart is and grow from there. And then, the other thing that Bryce mentioned, the fact that, and it's shocking, that 70% of Canadians, I guess, don't have wills. Bryce, is that the right number? About
I said estate plan, but yeah, I
plan, yeah.
think semantically it's I think 50% don't have wills.
Right.
Some people have a will but haven't thought about a larger
Gotcha.
plan.
Yeah. So for us, so we've partnered in 2000, the Niagara Community Foundation, we partnered with a group called the CAGP, the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. They have this amazing campaign. It's called Willpower. And what it is, it's a fantastic program, marketing campaign to reach out to Canadians to think about creating a will and an estate plan, but also to think about leaving assets to your favorite charities. So it's this wonderful universal opportunity and marketing campaign. So we've been part of that since 2000. Our goal back then, so at that point, only 4% of Canadians actually left some sort of charitable, bequest in their will, in their estate plan. So as of the end of last year, that number has actually slightly increased to 8%. So we feel like there is positive traction. And as we share these opportunities, people are starting to realize, as Madeline and Bryce said, you don't have to be the uber wealthy to do this. You can do this, and it makes sense on so many levels.
I can't actually even capture how much I appreciate this conversation that we're having, and really outlining all the options that people have and the considerations that actually really to take into account when we are making daily decisions. I want to get to some of our attendee questions before we look at options and a little bit more operational other things that we can talk about. So here's one of the questions that has come forward. And Madeline, I'm almost thinking it's likely going to go your way or Bryce's way. And the question is, are you seeing a reduction in giving now that the tax rules have changed for stocks and securities? And the secondary question to that is, are the new tax rules still preferable to capital gains? I'm not sure who wants to, but I'm Madeline. Thank you for taking it.
I'll just say that a client inquired, and the biggest gift I have overseen has come about after the change in the inclusion rate for capital gains. Because this individual is looking at the fact that if they died on June 25th, the capital gains that's within the portfolio would be well over the $250,000 limit. They'd attract the larger inclusion rate. And so, they're looking at the position that has the largest gain, and let's take that out now. And they're actually in a conversation with the charity that they're going to be working with on how they could do maybe this every year. So I would say the inclusion rate has maybe brought the issue of capital gains more to the forefront of conversations. And now it's like, well, how can I mitigate this either this year or for at the end when it all falls in?
That's excellent, actually. Thank you very much for sharing it. Another question that has also come in is that, can we will the $5,000 that we referenced here or more of that money to create that legacy fund? So the question is, can we will that amount of money that we have to create that legacy fund? And I think maybe, Bryan, it might be geared towards you.
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely. So if you did want to leave a portion of your estate or a specific number, like $5,000 to create a fund with the Niagara Community Foundation, you would work with your lawyer on that. And we actually have some wording. We've got a codicil for a will that it makes it very quick and easy for both sides, for both the prospective fund holder and for the lawyer to put that together. And then it's in your will, and you create a named fund, a legacy fund that would exist. So the short answer, absolutely.
Perfect.
And if
Bryce,
I can add it, I'll just add into that only to say that when somebody hears that word, they think, a testamentary trust, it sounds very complicated. I think lawyers love making things sound complicated. It's not. And I would say when we do things like that, it would be included in a base price for a basic will. It is just one more disposition that we would include. As Bryan said, we would even get the language from the Community Foundation, and we just input that in, and we get their charitable registration number, and it's for the purpose of creating a testamentary trust for $5,000. It's very straightforward to do.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. I love seeing these questions coming in, these live questions, in addition to the ones that actually have been texted and emailed to us as well. So I want to leave this pillar behind, conscious of time, and go to the second pillar that actually was looking at options that people have. And one of the questions that had come forward was that obviously people want to, and we've already talked about that, people want to support organizations and causes that reflect their values and their ethics. What are some of the tips that you could share for evaluating a potential recipient's record to ensure a match? So I want to look at it and saying, maybe the environment is close to my heart, it's precious to me, it's meaningful to me for all the reasons. But what are some of the tips for them that you could share to evaluate any potential recipient's record to ensure that this is actually a good match? And I'm not sure who would like to take
You want
it.
me? I could probably jump in,
Okay.
sort of from the macro version of that. So for us, the way that, so the Niagara Community Foundation, we've got a pool of funds that are donor directed.
Yeah.
As it sounds, the donor makes those decisions. We also have a pool of funds that are discretionary. That's where the Community Foundation, we actually make those decisions based on applications that we receive from the charitable sector. And that's a considerable amount of money. That's $1.5 million that we disperse on a discretionary basis. And how we vet, for the lack of better word, how we look at the organizations that we support. Number one, are they a registered charity? So CRA has some very specific things that charities in good standing need to meet every single year. And if they don't meet those, they can lose their charitable status. So if a charity is registered with CRA, that's a great first check. For us, the second check is using, as you mentioned, Bruce McDonald from Imagine Canada. Imagine Canada has a wonderful list of standards that they provide to provide comfort for people looking to invest in the charitable sector, to give to the charitable sector. So on our website, we list about a dozen things, like basic things that charities that need to meet the minimum of. That if you're doing these things, you're meeting the Imagine Canada and the foundation's checklist of standards. And finally, for us, because we live in Niagara, we utilize the Living in Niagara report. So we try to use data to combine our decision making with what is happening in the community, and the data and the information and the anecdotal evidence that is available in the Living in Niagara report. So for those three things for NCF, those are how we determine how we're going to utilize our granting dollars.
And I actually, with all the things that you listed, Bryan, I think this would be very helpful to anyone in actually as a starting point and in moving forward on this. I was wondering, and maybe Bryce, I'm going to lean a little bit on you and the options people have. So maybe if we deal with an individual who wants to sell their business, they want to sell their real estate that they have, how can one assist them in strategic giving instead of just saying, I'm moving forward with that sale? How can we tie that into actually the giving and the legacy giving at the same time?
I think it goes back to the earlier conversation we were having, is when you're talking about, obviously each example would be, sort of unique. You're selling a business, absolutely loop in all the advisors. Like Madeline said, you get the people that you are going to be working with, get your financial advisors, get your tax advisors, and get your lawyers talking, because there are ways that you can maximize the benefit to obviously yourself personally, because this is while you're alive. And part of that could very well be donations of securities, or donations in order to mitigate capital gains that you are going to have. And obviously our clock is ticking to avoid the higher inclusion rate. And let's assume we're not selling your business in the next 4 weeks, but there will always be ways to minimize those taxes. And I apologize, somebody's doing some construction if my noise is getting picked up there.
Actually, I can't hear it. So I think
okay, good. But yeah, I think, again, depends on what the specific thing is, what the specific asset is. Work with your advisors. Again, it's going to be tax driven almost always, that is the primary incentive we've got in order to even push bad people towards charitable giving, right? There's a self-serving aspect to it, and then of course you can focus on the things that are going to be close to your heart, and get the tax benefit of doing it that way.
Excellent. Madeline, there are some questions around how to establish, if one should or not, but it's how to establish a private foundation at the same time. And I was wondering if you could speak to that in case individuals are interested in that, advantages of it, and opportunities that might be aspects of that.
Well, I won't be able to speak in depth to it, but I will give a bit of an overview, and I'll weave in my opinion. I think the time, the energy, and the expense that's involved in a private foundation, an individual would be better off engaging the community foundation, where their private intent can be reflected, and it's going to be managed on an ongoing basis, like into perpetuity, if that's what you choose. If you go the private foundation route, you're going to have to be looking at, trustees, a board,
Yeah.
acquiring expertise in a variety of venues like investment management, tax planning, and it might be more efficient to do it through the community foundation, as an example, where there's you don't have to worry, the individual doesn't have to worry about the manager of their private foundation dying suddenly. And how do we replace that? So I think that is if that's a consideration for an individual, they should really be weighing it out with their accountant and their lawyer to see what specifically they're trying to achieve, and whether or not, again, the private foundation is the best vehicle to do that through.
I really appreciate that overview. And I see Bryan probably wanting to.
Yeah, yeah.
comment.
Thank you, Madeline. Summed that up perfectly. Is there? So you would have to register. So if an individual or a family was trying to create their own private foundation, you would have to register with CRA. You would have to develop a board of directors or a board of governors. You would have to go, hire, an accountant and a lawyer, which you may already have, which is fine. But those are separate costs, right? And additionally, for a third-party audit, if you were up to a certain size of, I think the threshold is about $500,000. So there are expenses and time that goes into doing all of that work. I have personally actually collapsed a couple of family foundations because they didn't want to do the administrative work. They just wanted to exercise their philanthropy in the community. So they knew we would take care of all of the administration, everything. And to Madeline's point, in perpetuity, the Niagara Community Foundation isn't going anywhere. So they don't have to worry about that aspect of it. And so we've actually worked with several families to collapse their own private foundation and then absorb all of that into our assets. And then every year they get to pick their favorite charities to support. It's one-stop shopping with NCF.
Yeah, I really do appreciate that perspective. And it is complex and complicated and takes a significant amount of involvement to actually set up a foundation at any time. Bryan, I'm going to lean on you for this because there was a couple of conversations that we had in the community, and individuals asked if you could share any success stories or case studies that illustrate the positive impact of legacy giving and endowed investments on both the donor and the community, because this is really where we're drawing the link, the bridge here between both. And you are so close to it in your role with NCF that I'm thinking that you likely have one or two great stories that are really worthwhile sharing with us that speak to that.
Well, that's everything that we do at the Community Foundation is we really transform, the philanthropic, the charitable goals of our fund holders, and then grant that money back into the community. I think sort of on one end, and Madeline was in lockstep with me at this time. You know, the David S. House Fund. David House was a local philanthropist, just an amazing gentleman. And his partner Suzanne, they'd actually had an endowment fund with NCF prior, but as part of his estate, David and his trustees selected the Niagara Community Foundation to administer what ended up being over $19 million of funding into the community. And at the time, it was the largest gift in the history of the region. So we were very honored as a community foundation. Madeline was our board chair at the time, and we created a whole new granting stream as a result. And, you know, in a couple of years, we've flowed over $2 million just from David's fund. So his $19 million with our investment and our management has already granted $2 million into the community. So we're very proud of that. You know, and you know, every fund that we have has a similar impact. We work with a number, you know, whether it's 5,000 or 19 million, really, and everywhere in between. So our annual report just came out. It's available on our website. We always include wonderful fund holder donor stories. So I would encourage people to check out our annual report from 2023. We had a fantastic year, both in the markets, thanks to, you know, our fund managers, and also we had a fantastic year fundraising. So more impact into the community.
Yeah, and we honestly thank you for all the impact that you have and make in the community. You make us really better, and it's always great to see actually where some of the funds are going. We're wanting to move over, I think we only have about 15 minutes left, to the last pillar that we had, where we wanted to look at how to make the best investment decisions. And Madeline, I'm going to start out with you because there's a couple of questions maybe that would help our participants today to saying, like, how can wealth advisors integrate legacy planning into their clients' overall wealth management strategies? What are some of the things that maybe what role do philanthropic goals play in determining investment decisions and asset allocations? What are some of the things that maybe we can prepare our participants here with when talking to a wealth advisor?
I think for anyone that thinks about doing it, and for wealth advisors, it starts with a conversation, like getting to know your client and getting to know what's important to them. And the one thing that, from my personal experience with having a fund in Niagara and being part of my family's fund in Stratford, is every family has a story to tell. Because historically in a family, something has been important. Like Mishka, you referenced it to, you know, intent or, values. So getting to know that about your client is the first thing that a wealth advisor should do. And it is a first thing that a client should be telling their wealth advisor about them. So that when we're having the discussion about what to do with the money, that value is interlaid into it, into the process. And it's as important as cash flow or any other aspect of managing your money, is to know that this person wants to do that. Then you start to break it out. Do you want to do it a bit every year? Do you want to do it a bit every 3 years? Because that all goes into how you're going to create the cash or the flow out to recognize that. Or is it going to be something for at the very end, after you've taken care of your life and your needs, and then what is left is going to be a component to a charity. So I guess it's going to start with a conversation, and the conversation will drive, and the timeline that you envision will drive how you break out the asset allocation.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. You do have to have that dialogue. And I think we need to be encouraged to ask those questions too, so that it's actually part of the conversation as we're moving forward. Bryan?
Yeah, just to kind of spin off that from when it gets to my end, I often refer to NCF. We're the Switzerland of charities, right? So, we can really, we can go any way and help those fund holders make those great decisions. And I often refer to it also as we're like a choose your own adventure book. So to Madeline's point, having those conversations and really listening to what is important to the client, or in our case, the donor and the fund holder. Where do you want to go? What's important to you? And then I can help you make those decisions down the road, and focus you if you need some, or provide a slate of options. So for us, it's following the path of those that it's their money, so you want to help them as much as possible. And the collaboration that I'm seeing from my end, from all of the different allied professionals, the accountants, the fund managers, the lawyers, everybody working together for the benefit of their client, to leave a legacy is really vital and important, and creates tremendous impact.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that addition too. Bryce, I'm looking your way. There's a couple of questions from a legal perspective. What are some of important factors individuals should consider when including charitable gifts in their estate plans? And from how can legal advisors ensure the intentions of their clients are accurately reflected in their wills? So it's really taking one step further of the conversations that we had. We established the importance of having a will and an estate plan, but how can we ensure that their intentions are accurately reflected?
I certainly, we, as everybody would do, we would have those conversations while we're talking about preparing the documents. Very often conversations have already been had with the financial advisors. They will have a bit of a gauge of what they want to do. Like I was saying before, getting those donations into the will is not overly complicated. They pick their priorities, and we put it in. The tax consequence on my side that we see, or that we try to be wary of, and this certainly would go back to the financial advisors, come with beneficiaries in RRSPs. We just have to remember the tax liabilities for things like RSPs and RIFs. Haven't had tax paid yet. All the funds get transferred to somebody, and then they haven't thought about the tax liabilities that would then go to the estate. So that's the only one that really comes up in my end that I see, where we have to make sure that there's adequate assets there. And as Madeline said, a lot of people don't think they do have adequate assets. The way that we get around that is by not giving specific dollar amounts necessarily, but instead focusing on what percentage of your estate would you like to donate. Or it could be up to a certain dollar value, or a percentage, no more than or no less than. And that way we don't worry about there being a shortfall, and we get to make sure that the charities actually do benefit.
That makes sense. Can I ask you, and Bryce, this goes to you directly too. We talked a lot about getting families and individuals engaged. When it comes from a legal perspective, how can families engage in multi-generational discussions about legacy planning? Because I'm thinking, is it in their best interest to bring all generations together for this? We often have looked at individual wills, estate plans, but maybe not when we look at 1, 2, 3 generations that are now needing to come together for this.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a one right answer, except communication is key. Talk. Don't pretend that this isn't happening. Don't do something that is unfair without talking to your family about why it's being done. The problems that we're seeing, the reason why there's so much estate litigation, is very often that people are making these plans in a vacuum, not talking to their family, probably being scared about them not liking what they've done. And when you look at something like a blended family, or second marriages, it becomes the problems are compounded so much that almost definitely you're going to feed everybody into a courtroom. Whereas if you sat down and said, guys, this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, speak now, let's talk it out, or forever hold your peace, you would actually leave a happy family behind you. So I think, yeah, communication is very important. Whether or not you include the third generation, I think is going to be very, specific to the circumstances.
I appreciate that. We're talking about investments, we're talking about people's money, their own accumulated wealth. And when we all talk about it, we say, how do we measure the impact that we leave? And this may be something where people are saying, how do I measure the impact of a charitable gift? how can we best communicate the use and success of this legacy gift? And I was wondering, I'm not sure if it's Madeline or Bryan who wants to maybe speak to that, but as we are giving it, how do people every year look at it and saying, this is the impact that my gift has had on the community, on us as a family, or in different ways of looking at it?
I can jump in to start. I think for, certainly as we grant to the multitude of charitable organizations, and they report back to us on how the funds that came to them from the community foundation, a lot of it is very tangible items, or tangible results. We were able to feed 800 primary, school students because of a grant from this particular fund, or we were able to hire 4 new mental health counselors for Pathstone because of the support of. So we really rely on our charitable partners to share that information with us, and then we try to then turn around and amplify that out into the community to show impact as it relates to, how their charitable giving has an impact in the community.
That's excellent. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking we have about a little bit of time for just some closing comments, because maybe some of the reflections didn't address some of the things that you wanted to share. So I thought I'll give each one of you like half a minute for closing comments of maybe something that we haven't addressed or something that you feel is worthwhile reiterating as part of what we had already discussed. And on that note, Bryan, I see that you're unmuted, so I'm going to take you up on this as being the first one, maybe with closing comments. I'm going to pass it on to Madeline after that, and Bryce to make the final comments.
Yeah, sure. We're very grateful for this opportunity, and thank you to Madeline and Bryce for being part of this group, this panel with me. You don't have to be a Bezos or a Zuckerberg to have a very positive impact in your community while you're living, and as part of your estate plan. Work with your allied professionals. They're there to help you, and they can also direct you in excellent ways to support the community while you're here and in other generations. So rely on those people. The Niagara Community Foundation is always a willing partner to support the charity at our website, and thrilled to have conversations with people who are interested in supporting the community.
Thank you so very much, Bryan, for that. And Madeline?
I would encourage, first of all, wealth advisors, don't assume your client's not interested. Ask. Ask if they've ever thought about it. Ask if they, do it right now. Ask if they'd like to expand it. Like, just start a conversation. And for individuals that would like to do it, don't assume you don't have enough money. I just thought of something I said to someone once. You have to be rich with intent. You don't necessarily have to be rich with money. So be rich with, if you're rich with intent, the money will end up coming somehow. And to reiterate a point of Bryan's, through the years sitting around the board table at the NCF, we would have grant recipients come in and talk about the impact of, a grant. And we don't have the time to go into the details, but one of the most impactful grants I ever saw was for like $5,000. And this organization talked about everything that $5,000 did. It was overwhelming. So be rich with intent. Don't assume that your client isn't interested. If you're a client, turn it on your professional and ask them, like, how do I start this? And then just start the journey. It's worth the investigation.
That's excellent. Excellent advice. Bryce, over to you.
Yeah, I think the key is to focus on what is important to you and find a way to make an impact. I think living in Niagara, we've seen mental health problems, we've seen homelessness issues, we've seen problems with youth. That's where I have decided to focus my donation dollars, my volunteer time, That's what I do. That's where my donations go in my will. It's pick the stuff that is your priority. I once had somebody, we have a book in our office where it has all the charitable registration numbers. And we were talking about charitable giving, and he said, well, can I see the book? And he flipped through the book and just kind of was like, well, how about that? And he had no thought at all. And there is no wrong answer. You want to do it that way, do it that way. But you can also just think about it for a little bit, figure out how you can make an impact on something that is important to you, and it's something that will last forever. So I think it's a great idea. And obviously, Niagara Community Foundation is such a simple way to do that. You can either focus, exactly what you want, like the environmental stuff that Bryan said, or you say, use your discretion. You know what the problems are in the community. Please use my money to help.
Yeah. I have to say, actually, I'm going to say this now, but these were one of the, each one of you were the most impactful actually closing comments over the years that we've held webinars, because all of you spoke about the intent. Madeline, I love your reference to it, of the reference to intent, also the reference of having a purpose and living with purpose, and passing that on to our community, next generations, and supporting them. So thank you to everything that the Niagara Community Foundation does for Niagara and beyond Niagara, for individuals. My thanks for your expertise, Madeline, Bryan, and Bryce, for being with us this morning. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this webinar actually through all of our digital channels and social channels, so that as many people as possible actually will be able to get the wealth of information out of it that we most definitely have received today. So thank you very much.